I'm Dick Norton, and I'm from UCLA.
And what's your field?
My field is particle physics, theoretical physics, and I've done mostly particle physics, but some statistical mechanics, many body theory.
And roughly when did you first come to the center?
I was here the first year in 1962, and I remember at the Washington meeting at the Sheraton Hotel in 1961, I was sitting on the porch with Fred Zacharias and Mike Cohen, and Mike Cohen said that he and two other people whom I didn't know were planning to start a physics center in Aspen, and Fred and I said, ha ha ha, big joke, and I said, well, if you start it, Mike, I'll come. And sure enough, it wasn't maybe less than a year, I heard it actually was to happen, and I came out the first year in tandem, actually, with Peter Kaus and his family. As we came out in two separate cars, but drove one behind the other. And that's how I found out about Aspen, and little did I realize that Aspen would play such an important part in my life for the next, 35 years or so, or 37 years, actually, because we've had a house here and for over 20 years, and I think in many ways that this is our home, and I simply work in Los Angeles.
Oh, that's fantastic. Did the mountains have much to do with it, do you think?
Well, I enjoyed the mountains before. Peter Kaus was a good friend before I came here. I think more than anybody else got me interested in the mountains, but I had some interest anyway, and he had climbed in the Sierra in California. So certainly the mountains played a big role in attracting me here, yes.
There seems to be this strange connection between physicists and mountains.
That's true. In fact, today, even if you hike in the local mountains, the chances are better than 50% that you'll see some physicists that you recognize.
True. Well, we're mostly interested, at least right now, in the earliest years, exactly when you first came here. Were any of the streets unpaved?
I think the question should be, were any streets paved? I think they were all unpaved, as I remember. And the living conditions were very different. There weren't that many. The density of houses was much lower, and I think all the physicists had a house.
Oh, most of the physicists stayed in a house.
Stayed in a house. I don't mean they owned it. They rented a house. Yes. Mm-hmm. And I was single the first year and lived in a house with 3 or 4 other physicists, including Mike Wardis, who was a accomplished mountaineer, and he led us up many of the local peaks that year. And I remember,
how long did people stay usually?
Well, I think, not totally sure, but I think 4 weeks was, I remember I stayed 4 weeks the first year I came. The people, came here, they had not come here before, so they didn't quite know what to expect, and I guess they had other things to do too, but the 4 weeks was a nice combination.
Do you think most, or yourself, were you paid by your universities, or did you have to wing it?
Well, I can't remember precisely, but I think in '62 I had a contract, mm-hmm. and which helped support me while I was here. But I may be wrong. It may be that the contract came later. There were some years in the late '60s where we did not come. Uh-huh. I came '62 through '65, and then there were some years when I didn't come, and started up again sometime in the '70s. To me, it was more fun. It was very unstructured. There were essentially no workshops. There was a much smaller group, and everybody got to know everybody else. And people would give lectures sort of geared to the interests of everybody, not just people in their specific field. The intensity of the work was much more low-key mm-hmm. than today. I mean, physics has changed actually over the years. And well, back to the mountain climbing. I remember that there would be an announcement on the bulletin board. Anybody who wants to climb North Maroon, say, show up at 5 o'clock in front of the Physics Center. And people would show up, and they'd get together, and off we go. And so that happened almost every weekend. There'd be some big hike or mountain climb.
With an aura of adventure, not just of going for a walk.
Oh yeah, it depended, of course, on the particular event, but I remember a large fraction of the people would come and join in these activities. And I remember Randy Durand, during one of these outings, showed us all how to use an ice axe on the slopes, and in fact, many years later, about 10 years ago, 12 years ago, I slipped coming down the snowfield above Grizzly Lake and arrested myself with an ice axe, and so I can tribute perhaps as my life maybe to that experience. I don't know.
And even then, F equaled MA.
You're right.
Do you think that, as in your field, has the Aspen Center for Physics made a difference to the accomplishments of the field?
Oh yes. I mean, some of the best people in the field have been here many times. Certainly Murray Gell-Mann was not here in the '62, I don't believe, but he came shortly afterwards. And that was the era when if you wanted to stay abreast of particle physics, in a sense, all you had to do was read his papers. I mean, that's the minimum, and if you did that and understood them, you were on the top of the field. And
it's interesting that, important as he was to the history of the center rose above just being Murray's place.
Oh yes, oh yes. I never thought of it as Murray's place. I mean, he was an important factor, but there were many other people who were leaders in their field, and I think it became increasingly so as the center developed in more recent years.
Could we go back a little? You said physics has changed. Very interesting. Sort of how?
Well, it's become more high pressure. I think the job situation for young people is difficult, and certainly in particle physics, and I think the university jobs are difficult even in other fields. It was true then also, but the competition, the intensity of the competition is more now. Young people are just more driven to work hard in their field, and I think feel less relaxed about enjoying themselves in a general way outside of their profession. And I mean, in those days, the physics at the center was very relaxed. You could go in and say, hey, about this idea, and about something that was really not central to what was going on in the field, but might be interesting. And people would, spend 2 or 3 hours or whatever, trying to understand what you were asking and maybe getting involved. Today, it's very difficult to get top people to answer a question that's not of immediate interest to them because of their pressure to.
But isn't that diversification just what the center could provide, and the sense of inspiration that sometimes comes from a side trip?
Oh yes, yes, it still does, but I think it does. Well, maybe I've probably gotten older and less on top of my field, and but for me, it's an effort to almost in any field to follow exactly what's going on today. The field is, well, of course, that's more of a comment about me than the Physics Center, perhaps. But
is there anything to a kind of a layman's idea that the easy things have been thought through, and it takes bigger science now to do the new thinking, or is it still room for small ideas?
Well, that's. I'm sure there are room for small ideas. I know in particle physics back in the '60s, early '60s, there wasn't really a theory. It was very unclear how to explain the interactions of the elementary particles. Now there's a theory. It's pretty clear it's not complete, but it's and it's very difficult to work out the consequences except in certain special situations. And then there's the string theory, which is developed and which hopes to put it all together, but it's very disconnected from experiment at this point and very mathematical, and appeals a lot to the theoretically and mathematically minded people, and it's very intense. And so in a sense, it's very good today that we have a theory, and it looks like, whereas in those days you were tempted to wander around away from the subject to find something, where you could accomplish something.
And of course, the world is not the same sort of a place, Cold War-wise, for example, as it was when the center first started.
Yes, it's more
amazing.
active, more pressure today than in those days.
The way the Aspen Center for Physics runs, is it very different than academe?
Yes, I think so. It's more informal. It's run by the people who participate, or by a large fraction of the people who participate. University has professional administrators who determine policy in general. Although, of course, UCLA is a little more democratic than some universities, but I don't think any university is as democratic as the Physics Center here in Aspen. If people are too far out and shoot from the hip and haven't accomplished anything in their past, there's a certain tendency to say they're a little kooky, but there are plenty of people who have those characteristics, who in fact have done something, or it depends how they shoot from the hip. If they shoot from the hip and you sense a real insight or a real creativity, then I think they're very welcome. But if they shoot from the hip and
Without any ammo, let's say.
without any ammo, right?
But wouldn't the center encourage those people who are oftentimes the spark that's needed?
Oh, I think so. Yes, that they would be very welcome at the center. If somebody has a completely difficult personality, it probably doesn't help them. But if it's compensated for by real creativity, that's more than enough to get them in the center. As I said before, that I came here with Peter Kaus, and the first year, sort of as a lark, that we would enjoy ourselves in Aspen for a year, and such a thing as a physics center in Aspen couldn't last. That's too unreal, But here we are, 37 years later. The physics center is completely established and has played a major role in physics.
We sort of got a feeling from George that he was pretty determined, with a
Yes.
sort of flip nonchalance apparently, but he was pretty serious underneath.
Yeah, well, I didn't know George. I certainly didn't know him at all when I came, and didn't have a feeling of how much he could contribute and how.
Well, you all were pretty young. How old were you, I suppose?
Well, I was. Let's see. I was born in '28, so I was 44. Sorry, 30. Wait, 28, 58. That's 30. I was 34. So. Yes, I was pretty young, certainly compared to what I am now.
It's a good year, by the way.
I see.
What if you extrapolate? What'll happen to us? Will we get so stuffy and formal it will freeze up, or will we stay about like we are?
I think, well, it's hard to predict, but I think it'll stay about the way we are, and I think that. If the Physics Center can solve the housing problem so that the people who come here can get rent which they can afford, I don't see any reason why the Physics Center can't continue to attract the very best people, which it has. I mean, it's amazing how the high level of people who've come here over the years.
Well, the number of people hasn't swelled too much, has it, really? It's been fairly constant the last 10 years.
Yes, I think that's right. It's, of course,
because of supply, not demand.
And there's office space is limited, but compared to the first year, of course, there's a lot more people.
In your experience with it, do you think of the financial side as having been very difficult or fairly smooth?
Well, I have not been directly involved with the financial aspects. I think as the center developed and attracted more and more good people, it's been rather successful in attracting funds from agencies. And so it's my impression, I don't know the details, that it hasn't had a difficult financial time. And then, of course, in the last few years, we had this fund drive headed by David Schramm, which just raised in excess of $3 million for the new building, which was just overwhelming.
Were you surprised?
I was very surprised, yes.
Candidly, I was too. I didn't think it could be done.
Yeah, I didn't think that could be done, not on that scale, no. And
it really was his dynamic energy, do you think, that had a lot to do with it?
Well, yes, I mean, it was his dynamic energy, and of course some of the people that he knew are certainly Michael Fain, and I can't think of the person's name, but some other people that, and of course the very big gift by Mr. Holzer. There were some key things that happened, but if you say, could it have happened without David? I somehow doubt it. I'd be disappointed if it got too much bigger. I think it's the right size. I personally would like to see it become a little more informal, a little less number of workshops, not so much activity for people on the top of their field talking to each other but rather an opportunity for people in different fields to, in a more relaxed way, to interact with these different people in different areas and educate themselves. But I'm probably reflecting my age, and
we hear that from many, but it's very difficult to make that happen, probably.
Yeah, I think it is difficult. The young people, as I say today, are just more competitive, more single-minded in their pursuit of research, and it's be very difficult to attract them to a place where they can't show their latest ideas to their competitors or their colleagues.
That's terribly interesting. It's not their parents that created that drive.
I doubt it.
What has been going on?
I think it's the nature of the field, the pursuit of contract money, which where you're measured by your publications and how much you made an impact on your fellow physicists.
Isn't it also true for young people in real estate or the military, or is it a generational
I wouldn't be
thing?
surprised. You know, I'm hardly an expert on these, but yes, that's my impression. Yes, that's more specialization today than 30 years ago even.
It's not exactly on our assigned topic, but I'm very curious about winner-take-all phenomena that is sweeping the country, where only one soccer team is even mentioned.
Well, that's an American notion. It seems to me that
and it's going
if you're not the greatest, you're nobody, relatively speaking.
And is that happening in physics, just a trace?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so.
So you have to fight harder to even be slightly noticed.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, there's good to be said for that and bad to be said.
Yeah, well, this country is very successful, and yet it's a nerve-wracking place to live in many respects.
Do you think the image of physics to the public as a large, the Luddites, the anti-science crowd, are they on? Is physics gaining or losing, do you think?
Well, I don't know is the real answer, but I would guess it's gaining. That I think more and more people realize that the scientific method, the scientific way of thinking is
not evil.
Is not evil, and that it achieves goals both for technology and for our understanding of the world, and that other ways of thinking may appeal to people, but it's hard to measure any real progress on understanding.
Isn't it probably so that the super collider defeat was much more a political thing than a genuine expression of people's feelings?
Yes, I think so. yes, and the finance, and I think my impression is that the finances there were some mistakes and yes, overruns and costs which provoked the politicians to turn it off. It was not a scientific decision.
Could we return to that after enough wounds healed? And
I would think so, and particularly if the field develops in such a way that becomes clear that, or very suggestive that certain phenomena are going to be seen experimentally only under those kinds of conditions, of that energy and so forth.
Well, you've been part of Aspen as well as part of the Physics Center.
Mm-hmm.
And quite a few. How many physicists have put a stake into the ground that close to that?
Yeah, it's a lot. Keep me long enough, I probably could count them, but yeah, I would say something 20-some is a guess off the top of my head. I think many physicists who've come here over the years have become more and more attached to Aspen, to the point, as I said earlier, they feel it's their home.
And even today, with the pressure we have from the multi-trillionaires, that same fondness still exists?
Largely. People will argue it's not the same Aspen as it used to be. If you go into a store today, the mentality of the clerks is not very different than it is in Los Angeles, say. And that, I think, is too bad. It's not the way it used to be, where everybody has sort of a real desire to be in the mountains. And
we've learned that's universal all over the resort, everywhere. It's not unique to us.
Yes.
But would a young physicist, of course he couldn't buy a house here, no way. Would the next generation, do you think, will come to Aspen and stake out, or will they buy a house in Basalt?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't see them buying a house in Basalt because that's too far from the Physics Center. And as you say, the prices here are now such that virtually no physicist starting today, on his salary at least, could ever buy a house here. On the other hand, there are physicists, maybe not the very youngest ones, but there are physicists even this year who are thinking in terms of buying locally, and so it's continuing to happen. I would have to think it would slow down.
We locals screech a lot, not myself, for employee housing. There's talk about trying to build housing for the Physics Center.
Yes.
Have you been aware of that?
Yes, I've heard it discussed, and of course it's a very good idea from the point of view of having housing available for the physicists. I mean, from my personal point of view, if I was a young physicist, I don't think I would want to live in a dormitory with other physicists. So there's that aspect, which is maybe not so good. But yeah, one way or another, the housing has to be available for young people at fairly reasonable prices.
If we fell on such a housing problem that we could only house half as many people, we still could have a very fine center for physics.
Yes.
Presumably, just would have to be a little more elite, but
yes,
it still could be valuable.
Oh yes, I think so. I hate to see the Physics Center turned into only Nobel Prize winners and their friends, and I like the way it is now. It attracts very good people, but it also allows young people and
about the right size.
Yeah, it's about the right. I get the feeling it's about the right size. Yes, and of course to come here and hear lectures or talk to people in all these areas helps very much to seed ideas that you then take back to your university for the rest of the year. And that kind of seeding would not happen.
Now, by lectures, you don't mean the public lectures.
No,
No,
I mean the more professional lectures, and also just conversations, hallway conversations.